You match the description of a burglary suspect. Tall, muscular, black male.
That's not a description. That's a demographic.
You are escalating without cause, officer.
The body camera would later show the exact moment Officer Kyle Mercer decided that a quiet suburban porch was a battlefield and a decorated war veteran was a threat. And by the time the footage finished playing in federal court 8 months later, the city would be staring down an $8.1 million settlement it could no longer explain away. At 6:18 a.m. on a cool Tuesday morning in Fairfax County, Virginia, retired Army Major Darius Whitfield was lacing up his boots in the foyer of the home he had owned for 12 years when his phone buzzed with a ring notification. Motion detected at the front door. Outside, the sky was just turning from navy to gray, the kind of still dawn where sprinklers tick across manicured lawns and commuters haven't yet filled the roads. Whitfield, 52 years old, Bronze Star recipient, 26 years active duty with 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan, walked toward the door in a pressed t-shirt and running pants, expecting maybe a package delivery or a neighbor needing help jump-starting a car. Instead, the camera preview showed a patrol cruiser angled sharply across his driveway, red and blue lights flashing silently against the brick facade of his home. The cruiser's driver's side door opened before Whitfield even reached the handle. Officer Kyle Mercer, 29 years old, for years on the force, stepped out adjusting his duty belt, his posture stiff with the kind of alertness that reads as authority from a distance and agitation up close. Whitfield opened the door, but did not step outside. "Morning, officer," he said evenly. Mercer didn't return the greeting. "Step out onto the porch, sir." No explanation. No introduction. Just a command. Whitfield raised one eyebrow slightly. "Is there a problem?" Mercer's jaw flexed. "We've had reports of a burglary suspect in this neighborhood. You match the description." Whitfield glanced past him at the empty street. No broken windows, no scattered patrol units canvassing yards, no urgency beyond the flashing lights. "What's the description?" he asked. Mercer's answer came too fast. "Black male. Tall. Muscular build." The words hung there, thin and insufficient. Whitfield exhaled slowly, the way he had before briefing soldiers under mortar fire. "Officer," he said, calm but precise, "that's not a description. That's a demographic." Across the street, a neighbor's porch light flicked on. Another security camera swiveled. Mercer's body cam captured the subtle shift in his posture, the irritation creeping into his tone. "Sir, I'm not going to argue with you. Step outside." Hands visible. Whitfield stepped onto his porch, bare feet against the cool concrete, palms open at chest level. He did not descend the steps. "I live here," he said. "You're on my property. If there's an issue, I'm happy to cooperate, but I'd like to know what crime I'm suspected of." Mercer moved closer, boots scraping against the top step. "You're being detained until we sort this out." "Detained for what?" Whitfield asked. "Suspicion. Based on..." Mercer didn't answer that. Instead, he said, "ID. It's inside," Whitfield replied. "You haven't established probable cause." The phrase landed heavier than Mercer expected. His body cam audio later revealed the faint shift in his breathing. "Turn around," Mercer ordered. "Officer, I am not resisting," Whitfield said. "But I do not consent to unlawful detention." Mercer reached forward suddenly and grabbed Whitfield's left wrist. The movement was abrupt, unnecessary. Whitfield did not pull away. He did not clench his fists. He simply looked directly at Mercer and said, clearly enough for both cameras to record, "You are escalating without cause." That sentence would be replayed hundreds of times. Mercer interpreted the calm as defiance. "Stop resisting," he snapped, though there was no resistance. Whitfield's right hand remained open, visible. "I'm not resisting," he repeated. "I'm asking you." To articulate, the sentence never finished. Mercer stepped back, drew his taser in one fluid motion, and pointed it at Whitfield's chest. "Last warning." "For what?" Whitfield asked. Mercer fired. The probe struck center mass. The electrical current locked Whitfield's body mid-syllable and sent him crashing forward onto his own porch, cheek striking concrete with a sound that neighbors would later describe as sickeningly hollow. Inside the house, his wife Angela screamed his name. The Ring camera captured the fall from above, the body cam from below, the neighbor's phone from across the street. 3 angles. One version of events. As Whitfield convulsed, Mercer approached cautiously, taser still active, and said under his breath, barely audible but unmistakable, "They always want to argue." The statement would later transform the narrative from mistaken identity to pattern. Angela Whitfield rushed to the doorway but froze when Mercer barked, "Stay inside." She shouted that her husband was a veteran, that he lived there, that his driver's license listed the address. But Mercer was already radioing for backup, framing the scene in clipped phrases: non-compliant male, possible suspect, deployed taser. Dispatch responded with confusion. The burglary call had described a teenager fleeing on foot 2 miles east, wearing a hoodie and jeans. Whitfield, 6 feet 2 inches, broad-shouldered but graying at the temples, lay stunned on a porch in athletic gear. Mercer either hadn't waited for clarification or hadn't cared to. When backup arrived 4 minutes later, the first responding officer slowed visibly upon seeing the scene. A middle-aged man on the ground, hands visible, a distraught spouse, multiple neighbors recording. "What do we got?" the officer asked. Mercer replied. He wouldn't comply. Whitfield, struggling to push himself up despite the neuromuscular shock still reverberating through his frame, managed to say, "I asked for a reason." Blood traced a thin line from his cheekbone toward the edge of the step. The sun had risen fully now, casting clear morning light on the tableau. The flag mounted beside the Whitfield's front door, the military license plate on the SUV in the driveway, the small bronze plaque near the mailbox reading MAJ, Darius Whitfield, U.S. Army, RET. None of it had been checked before the trigger was pulled. By 6:32 a.m., an ambulance was en route. By 6:45, the neighborhood group chat was flooded with video clips. And by noon, a story that began with a vague description, black, tall, muscular, was no longer about a burglary call at all, but about what happens when authority meets assumption on the wrong doorstep at the wrong moment, and someone decides that questioning an order is the same thing as threatening one. By lunchtime, the footage was everywhere, and what Officer Kyle Mercer had framed over the radio as a non-compliant male detained after matching a burglary description was unraveling frame by frame under the cold precision of replayed buttons, slow motion scrubs, and audio enhancement filters that left no room for interpretation. Major Darius Whitfield was admitted to Fairfax General at 7:14 a.m. with a fractured cheekbone, 2 cracked ribs from the forward impact of the fall, and cardiac monitoring ordered as a precaution due to the taser discharge. The ER physician documented visible probe marks centered on his chest and noted in the chart that the patient was alert, oriented, and repeatedly stating, "I was asking for probable cause." Meanwhile, back on the porch where fate scorch marks dotted the concrete, internal affairs investigators were already pulling digital evidence from 3 separate sources: Mercer's body cam, his cruiser dash cam, and the Whitfield's ring system, which had recorded not only the confrontation, but the full 30 seconds before Mercer approached the door. That pre-contact footage became critical. It showed Mercer sitting in his cruiser, engine idling, lights activated, staring at the house for nearly 20 seconds before exiting. It showed no radio update confirming proximity to the burglary suspect. It showed him adjusting his vest, glancing at his reflection in the side mirror, and stepping out without waiting for dispatch clarification that the reported suspect was last seen running eastbound on foot. At 9:02 a.m., the department released a brief holding statement. An officer-involved use of force incident occurred this morning during a burglary investigation. The subject sustained non-life-threatening injuries. The matter is under review. The language was clinical, detached, but the video was not. By 10:15 a.m., Angela Whitfield had uploaded the ring clip. By 11 a.m., it had been shared 40,000 times. By noon, local news stations were running split-screen comparisons of Mercer's body cam against the ring overhead view. The synchronized audio revealing the key exchange: "You are escalating without cause." Taser click. Impact. Fall. The most damning moment, however, came 8 seconds later, when Mercer, standing over a convulsing 52-year-old veteran, muttered, "They always want to argue." Analysts replayed it at half speed, enhanced it, cleaned the audio. The words held. Civil rights attorneys began calling the Whitfield family before Darius was even discharged. Veterans organizations issued statements by mid-afternoon. The county supervisor scheduled an emergency briefing. Internally, the department's narrative began to fracture. Dispatch log showed Mercer had been advised that the burglary suspect was described as approximately 17 to 19 years old, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. Whitfield was wearing gray athletic gear and had visible graying hair. More critically, the license plate of Whitfield's SUV, clearly visible from the cruiser's position, returned to the same address. Mercer had not run it. When confronted by his sergeant at 1:47 p.m., according to preliminary internal notes later obtained in discovery, Mercer stated, he got argumentative immediately. Wouldn't follow commands. The sergeant asked, before or after you grabbed him? Mercer paused. The body cam timeline showed the grab occurred 42 seconds into the encounter. No raised voices from Whitfield. No aggressive posture. Only repeated requests for explanation. By 3 p.m., Officer Mercer was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The union released a statement emphasizing the dangers officers face responding to burglary calls and urging the public to withhold judgment. But the footage kept circulating. Former service members posted side-by-side photos, Major Whitfield in desert camouflage, medals pinned to his chest, and the still image of him face down on his porch. Commentators highlighted Mercer's prior complaints, 7 in 4 years, 5. Involving minority residents, 3 related to unnecessary taser display, all previously cleared as within policy. Reporters began asking what within policy meant if it resulted in this. At the hospital, Whitfield gave a short statement from his bed, oxygen cannula still in place, cheekbone bruised deep purple. I've led soldiers under fire, he said steadily. I've made split-second decisions with lives on the line. This morning, I asked a police officer to articulate probable cause. That is not a threat. The clip aired on every major network by evening. Back at the department, use of force review protocols were being examined with new urgency. Data analysts pulled Mercer's taser deployment records. He had activated his taser 9 times in 18 months, triple the department average for patrol officers in similar districts. In 6 of those cases, the subjects were described as verbally non-compliant. None involved weapons. Training supervisors acknowledged Mercer had completed de-escalation modules, but had received a notation 6 months earlier. Tends to escalate quickly during verbal disputes. Recommends scenario-based retraining. The retraining had not been scheduled. By 6:30 p.m., protesters gathered outside police headquarters holding signs reading probable cause is not a crime and veterans deserve better. The mayor called for transparency and pledged an independent review. Meanwhile, Whitfield's porch had become a symbolic backdrop. Neighbors placed small American flags along the walkway. Angela Whitfield stood on the steps that evening, staring at the fate outline where her husband's blood had been washed away. He didn't yell, she told reporters. He didn't threaten. He asked a question. The investigation widened when a forensic audio specialist confirmed the timing. Mercer's taser was deployed 11 seconds after Whitfield said he did not consent to unlawful detention. There was no new movement from Whitfield in that interval. No aggressive shift. Just speech. Legal analysts began framing the issue not simply as excessive force, but as retaliatory force, punishment for questioning authority. The phrase, escalating without cause, trended nationwide. By the second night, national veteran advocacy groups demanded federal involvement. The Department of Justice acknowledged it was monitoring the situation. Inside City Hall, risk management officials began calculating exposure. Civil rights lawsuits involving taser misuse in comparable jurisdictions had resulted in multi-million-dollar settlements, particularly when clear video evidence contradicted officer narratives. And here, there were 3 cameras. 3 angles. No ambiguity. Officer Mercer retained counsel. Through his attorney, he released a statement asserting he acted in good faith under rapidly evolving circumstances. But the timeline undercut the claim. No foot pursuit. No suspect description match, no visible thread, no attempt to verify residence. Just a man on his own porch at dawn, asking why he was being detained. By the end of the week, the department's internal memo to staff emphasized professional communication during citizen encounters and announced a temporary suspension of solo patrol assignments for officers with prior use of force flags pending review. It was damage control, but the damage had already calcified in public opinion. The image of a decorated black veteran tossed on his doorstep for requesting legal justification became shorthand for something larger than one officer's misjudgment. It became a referendum on training, discretion, and the thin line between authority and assumption. And as the Whitfield family's attorney drafted a federal complaint alleging violations of the 4th and 14th Amendments, city attorneys quietly began discussing a number, an amount substantial enough to avoid trial, large enough to signal accountability, and unavoidable given what the cameras had preserved in unforgiving clarity. By the time the case reached federal court, the number had already been whispered in back hallways at City Hall, passed between insurance adjusters and risk analysts, typed into confidential emails with subject lines that read simply exposure. And everyone understood that the footage, those 94 seconds from porch command to taser discharge, had removed the city's best defense before a jury would ever be sworn in. Major Darius Whitfield filed suit 53 days after the incident, naming Officer Kyle Mercer individually and the city of Fairfax under claims of excessive force, unlawful detention, retaliatory force for protected speech, failure to train, and municipal liability under federal civil rights statutes. The complaint was methodical, citing timestamps from the body cam. Dispatch logs showing the burglary suspect was described as a teenager in a hoodie 2 miles away, Mercer's prior internal flags for rapid escalation, and the now infamous statement, "They always want to argue," as evidence of mindset rather than mistake. During discovery, internal emails surfaced that complicated the department's public posture of shock. 6 months before the incident, a training supervisor had written, "Mercer shows proficiency in tactical response, but struggles with verbal disengagement. Recommend remedial de-escalation scenarios." That training was postponed due to staffing shortages. Use of force analytics showed Mercer's taser deployment rate ranked in the top 8% department-wide. In 3 prior incidents, subjects were labeled verbally combative despite no recorded physical resistance. Each had been cleared as within policy. Plaintiff's counsel framed the pattern succinctly in a pretrial brief. The defendant officer equated questioning with threat. The city initially signaled it would defend the case, arguing Mercer responded to a burglary call and acted within his discretion, but pretrial hearings proved costly. The judge denied qualified immunity at the summary judgment stage, noting that a reasonable jury could find that deploying a taser against a stationary homeowner who posed no immediate threat violated clearly established law. That ruling shifted leverage overnight. Settlement negotiations accelerated. Meanwhile, Major Whitfield returned to public view not with anger, but with discipline. He attended community forums in a dark suit, posture erect despite lingering rib pain, repeating the same measured refrain. Accountability is not anti-police. It is pro-Constitution. Veterans groups stood behind him at press events, medals pinned to jackets, some wiping tears when the porch footage replayed on portable screens. Officer Mercer resigned 3 months into litigation, before termination proceedings concluded, though the state certification board later opened its own review citing conduct unbecoming. He did not speak publicly. His attorney maintained that Mercer acted under pressure and regrets the outcome, but depositions had already revealed inconsistencies. Under oath, Mercer admitted he did not wait for dispatch confirmation, did not run the vehicle's plate despite clear visibility, and interpreted Whitfield's refusal to turn around as escalating behavior even though Whitfield's hands remained visible throughout. When asked why he drew his taser instead of disengaging, Mercer responded, he wasn't complying. The plaintiff's attorney asked, complying with what, specifically? There was a 7-second pause in the transcript before Mercer answered, my commands. The distinction between lawful command and ego-driven escalation became central. Mediation lasted 11 hours. The city's insurers projected trial risk exceeding 8 figures given video clarity, denial of immunity, and the plaintiff's decorated military record. By 9:47 p.m., both sides agreed to terms. $8.1 million. The settlement included no admission of liability, but mandated structural reforms, automatic external review of all taser deployments, compulsory de-escalation retraining for the entire department, early intervention triggers for officers exceeding force benchmarks, and public release of body cam footage within 30 days of critical incidents. At the press conference announcing the agreement, The mayor called it a difficult but necessary resolution. Then Major Whitfield stepped to the podium. He did not read from notes. "I wore this nation's uniform for 26 years, he said. "I trained soldiers to respect rules of engagement. Use of force is never the first option. It is the last. On my porch that morning, it became the first." He paused, scanning the cameras. This was not about safety. It was about impatience with a citizen who knew his rights. He announced that $2 million of the settlement would fund a veterans' civil rights defense initiative and scholarships for ROTC cadets studying constitutional law. "If we expect young officers to understand probable cause," he said, "we should teach it with the same seriousness we teach marksmanship." The crowd behind him, veterans, neighbors, clergy, applauded quietly, not triumphantly. In the months that followed, reforms began reshaping department culture. Early intervention software flagged officers whose force metrics exceeded peer averages. Supervisors were required to review body cam footage randomly each month. Complaints dropped 19% in the first year. Taser deployments decreased by nearly a third. Some officers grumbled about second-guessing in hindsight, but training commanders reframed it differently. Documentation protects good officers too. The porch where Whitfield fell remained unchanged except for a subtle hairline crack where his cheek struck concrete. Neighbors often noticed him standing there in the mornings with coffee, sunlight catching the bronze retirement plaque near the mailbox. He did not remove the ring camera. If anything, he upgraded it. When asked months later whether the settlement felt like justice, Whitfield answered carefully. "Justice would have been no taser. This is accountability." Officer Mercer's certification was formally revoked 9 months after the incident. The state board cited unreasonable use of conducted energy device and failure to adhere to constitutional standards. His law enforcement career ended not with sirens, but with paperwork. The case file closed with a summary line that would later be used in police academies statewide. Incident demonstrates consequences of force escalation absent probable cause. Recruits now watch the porch footage during constitutional policing modules. Instructors pause the video at the moment Whitfield says, "You are escalating without cause," and ask cadets what alternatives existed in that second. There are always many. The city's $8.1 million payout became one of the largest in its history, but the greater cost was reputational, a recognition that cameras do not create misconduct, they reveal it. And every morning at 6:18, when the Ring camera logs another quiet sunrise, it records something simple. A homeowner stepping onto his porch, unarmed, unthreatening, exactly where he has every right to be.